Good evening. We are on the front porch with United Capital Management, and our guest this evening is Charles Allen, CEO and founder of BTCS. Good evening, Charles.
Chad, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So, Charles and I met at the H.C. Wainwright conference in September. I have to think how far back that was, but I know my flight got bumped to the next day, so I was flying on 9/11. So we met on probably 9/11 or 9/12 that afternoon or the next day. And definitely one of the more in-depth, intriguing interviews that we did while we were there, and we appreciate all the gracious time you gave us, Charles. And I want to, before I jump into the nitty-gritty here, even though Charles is the CEO of a publicly traded company, we need to make it clear that we are not making recommendations this evening. We're not giving investment advice. This is just a conversation, front porch conversation. And to dive right in, I want to start with Bitcoin versus Ethereum. And I think we need to start at the real elementary level. Our organization, last 3 years, has done a tremendous amount of education and explaining, Bitcoin is really not money. It's really not currency. It's just pure data storage. And it's both Bitcoin and Ethereum are a huge future to technology and going to change commerce and change the world in significant ways. And I want to get into that and let you talk, but kind of a way to get it rolling. Here in the Midwest, when we had less communication and less contacts in Silicon Valley in year 99, 2000, 2001, if you would have asked me or my clientele what Amazon was, we would have told you it was a online book company going bankrupt. Okay, and technology is moving every day in multiple spaces. It's working while we sleep, and it's changing our future. So let's just dive right in as to how you define how you would introduce Bitcoin in the most true, effective fashion to a fifth grade class versus Ethereum, and what you see in the difference between the two of them.
Yeah, well, they're both built on blockchain technology, which is just as for a fifth grader, I would say all a blockchain is a ledger, right? A list of who owns what, right? And over time, keeping track of who owns what is like a key component, and there's usually a middleman involved in that, right? And so if it's gold, that's a record keeping mechanism, right? If you have a coin of gold, you can give it to someone else, or you had, the barter system. And so now we have, money, which is backed by the full faith and credit of the US dollar, right? What crypto allows, both Bitcoin and Ethereum, is for you to have a record keeping mechanism of who owns what on a global scale with no trusted intermediary. Right? And that could be anything. It could be a security. It could be cash, because at the end of the day, money is a belief system, right? We believe in the US dollar because it's backed by the economy. There are other countries you could live in where you may not have so much belief in the currency. So Bitcoin's main value, now you kind of give a little bit of background on the blockchain, is it's a store of value, right? And that's based on a belief system that everyone wants to own this because there's a limited supply and people are willing to, trade in it. It's relatively slow as a blockchain. It means in terms of transaction time, so it's most likely not going to be used as a currency, and it's volatile. So people don't want their currencies to be volatile. You need to know if you're going to go buy a hamburger that, the cost of a hamburger, today is the same price as tomorrow, right? It can't be twice as expensive or, half as much. Otherwise, it really makes it an investment. So I think, Bitcoin's core advantage is it's a first mover. It's a great blockchain. It's been secure, and it is an amazing store of value if you want to kind of hedge against, inflation and other things. It's probably not going to be an amazing currency because it's slow. Ethereum, on the other hand, think of it more of it's a global decentralized platform, right, where you can build things on top of it. So it again is a blockchain. That's decentralized, where you can trade the token, but its real value proposition is kind of like being like the internet. It's at the infrastructure level. You can build things on top of it that have real world use cases. And there's a bunch of examples of that, right? Like you can, like USDC is a stable coin that's built on top of Ethereum, and people transact in that on a more regular basis, like a currency, and it derives its security because it's built on Ethereum's blockchain. Or NFTs. I'm not saying a monkey smoking a cigar is worth $3 million, but like the concept of a non-fungible token, which could be a ticket to a baseball game or the Super Bowl, or it could be all sorts of other things, right? Those most of those are built on Ethereum's blockchain. So think of it as more of Ethereum is like betting the internet in 2000, right? Where as long as things get built on this new Web 3.0 technology of decentralization and digitizing assets, that's one of the it's like that building block. So I think those
Would
are
you
the core
accept
differences.
would you accept that Bitcoin is data storage and Ethereum is processing? Is that one way of looking at it?
Yeah,
Is that
that's a good way of looking at it. Exactly.
okay? So, um, when you bring up no intermediary being able to verify a transaction, when you bring up sports tickets, I know of a Kansas family that bought Royals tickets that were fraudulent tickets for the back when they were in the World Series back in 2015, and I've had that happen to friends at the Final Four. So there's definitely a need for NFTs in that ticket space and transactions that way. So go on. I kind of interrupted you. Did you?
But no, I think that kind of wraps it up. I mean, I think look, they're the number one and number two blockchains, right? Like we at BTCS, we were initially a Bitcoin miner and focused on Bitcoin, and have shifted to Ethereum. We think there's more utility there than in Bitcoin. But Bitcoin's still it's a great crypto. It's the number one crypto. It's a great store of value. But for us, we decided to focus on Ethereum, right? We think there's more upside, and it's at least as a public company, it's we used to mine Bitcoin. That's highly competitive. They're more almost energy arbitragers at this point, given the size and scale, and we could focus more on the tech around Ethereum. So
Okay.
I think they're if you're looking at these two, if you're looking at crypto, these are the two ones you should obviously look at, in my opinion.
The next question, if we were sitting here, you give me the time frame. Let's talk about 3 years looking back, if you want to. If you want to go out 5 and 10 years, and someday we'll watch this interview and we'll either say, "Oh my goodness, were we ever did we ever call the future?" And wow, that was profound. Or maybe we'll look back and say, "What were we thinking?" But if we were what is the impact going to be with these layer one, layer two protocols, and how they're going to change commerce? And if we were sitting here 10 years from today looking back, what do you think is going to change? What's going to be most impactful?
I think you'll see two things, right? One, you'll see new business models that didn't exist in the past coming to fruition. That's one. And then you'll see on the other hand, established business models having their back ends revamped, and you won't notice that, right? So for you as the user, you may not, as a consumer, you may not see those. So on the new business models, you will definitely see that, right? And an example of that would be NFTs. And I kind of refer to like that monkey smoking a cigar was never what I thought of as an NFT. But for artists, if you think about an artist, if you sell a piece of art, right, in the beginning of your career, you're a great artist, you're selling your art, you're not getting paid much. And it's only later in your career that your art has more value. But you don't get the benefit of the early art you sold. It goes up in value, but as it trades, you don't get anything. And so that's why you've seen the NFTs really be, the images be a big use case of blockchain technology. Because if you're an artist and you sell digital art, and I don't want to say, what has value and what doesn't, I'm not kind of, I don't think the monkeys were worth 3 million. But if digital art is a thing, and I think it can be, if you're an artist and you sell something and you can get a slice of every resale, every subsequent commission, that's really valuable. And the reason that popped is because there was no incumbent player. Like you talked about fraudulent tickets, and that's, I think, ticketing for sporting events and other events is a huge use case. I think it's really hard to break in that market because there are huge incumbent players that aren't going to give. And that would be where the back end comes in, where they adopt blockchain technology over time, and you don't even know it's changed, but it's just better, right? You don't get a fraudulent ticket. It's based on a blockchain transaction, and maybe the venue can get paid every time a ticket gets resold, right? They could cut themselves into it. So, those are in the future. I think we'll see things we didn't think about. Like the stock market, in my opinion, is kind of broken to some extent with illegal naked shorting, right? You've seen the SEC, mandate that we go from T+3 to T+2. Everyone wants to get it to T+0, so you don't have these weird things going on. But DTC just bought a blockchain company. Like, it's like the biggest. This is kind of behind the scenes that no one thinks about. But there's a lot of weird stuff that goes on in the security market that I think will go away with blockchain technology over time. I think for the average consumer, they won't know it happened, but it will benefit society in a huge way. So there's going to be the stuff you see and the stuff you don't. And honestly, for the tech to work, you don't want to know it's there, right? No one talks about, FTP or, these other, protocols of the internet that people used to talk about in 2000. It was like, would you have .com in your name? Like, no one thinks about that. No one thinks about how their Uber shows up, how Amazon logistics work, right? The tech's just there, and it makes their life, there's products and services that are really cool to use. And I think, that's when it succeeded. When you don't even know you're using it and you are, right? That'll be when it's there, and that's when you'll be like, wait, how does that work? Well, you have to really ask. And I think that's, there's a lot of things. It could be securities, it could be ticketing, it could be titles to cars, right? The fact we have title insurance, this is a great one. This will take forever. Why, when you buy a house, why do you need title insurance? That is the most retarded thing, right? Like, wait, I need to have insurance that says that I have the title that I have, and I can't get a loan without it because there's so much distrust in the system. Well, what if every title record was on the blockchain and it was immutable, right? Like, we would be off to the races. It won't work because title records are kept at the county, at the county clerk's office, and it's local, and it's a very fragmented system that's hard to, change. But, maybe that's not 5-10 years from now, 50 years from now. Title records should all be on the blockchain, or a blockchain, not the blockchain. There's multiple blockchains, but it should all be blockchain based, and there should be no title insurance because you don't need it, because technology is advanced to a point where you don't need to insure for it. And that would be something you wouldn't even think about, where you could just transfer your title record on your phone, right?
Back to the way this, to your earlier comments, this is backing up a minute, but I don't know how this Apple phone works. I just use it, and
Yep.
what's behind it, and credit cards. I remember when been in the business long enough. I remember when my clients resisted and didn't trust credit cards, but the technology is there and has become trusted. So when I think of, you brought up title companies. We use that as an example in educating clients, being able to prove title with no title company, no title insurance, and that you think would be here. How about protecting software and automated cars? That's one of my favorite things. I believe that my 3-year-old grandchild, by the time he's 80, he won't hardly remember anybody that was killed in a car accident. I believe that's on its way.
Oh yeah, self-driving cars is coming. It's just a question of time, right?
And it's just being able to trust the data, is the
Yep.
key. And so the let's talk briefly about when you read the history of how both government and the public, they were slow to accept something that they feared, and eventually the infrastructure was built out and it made the technology safe and easy to adopt, and it was something called electricity. And when you read history books, the resistance to the automobile, do you feel that in the, we'll call it crypto, I'd rather call it Web 3, okay, Web 3, but in the Web 3 crypto space, Do you think the resistance to adoption by the government and the elitists is any more than it was 100 years ago, 120 years ago with electricity and automobiles?
That's a hard question. I don't know in that I don't know what those guys had to, what those, entrepreneurs had to deal with at the time. I do know sitting in my seat and the stuff I've had to deal with over the last 10 years, it's a bit ridiculous. There is a tremendous amount of resistance, and it's funny. With crypto, it's a little bit different. Like if you think about what like Uber did, they broke all the rules. But no one cares. Is it like so what? You're running an illegal taxi in a like no one really cared, right? With crypto, the stakes are much higher, right? You're taking people's money. If people exchange, a dollar for a Bitcoin, that has value. And I think there's been a lot of bad actors in the space over the last 10 years. I've firsthand seen a lot of, crooks doing ICOs and just stealing money. We've seen, Sam Bankman-Fried with FTX, Mt. Gox. I mean, you look at the history, the industry has not, it's not done very well, right? As kind of startups and entrepreneurs, in a space where it really is people's money, right? It's unlike an Uber where you're giving someone a ride in a taxi. So I think there's definitely fault on the industry side that have made it probably worse, as opposed to the general skeptics of like, hey, is electricity going to work? You're going to burn down my house? Am I going to get electrocuted? So I think the industry unfortunately has not done a great job, and there's kind of knee jerk reaction from the regulators. And so what kind of comes to my mind is who's going to survive this, right? Like most of the incumbent players are looking at this technology and figuring out how to adopt it to their processes, right? And so, one of two things will happen. The startups will build the tech and get bought out, and the larger players will absorb that technology and apply it, or you'll have some companies that bring that technology, to the market and make it. So it's an interesting time, right? In this down market, we're seeing a lot of M&A activity. And I think especially on the regulatory side for companies that are operating in as a custodian of your assets, right? It's more likely than not that as regulatory clarity comes to play, the large incumbent players, the banks, the security firms, are going to move into the market really fast and hard. They have the customer base, they have the processes and procedures. The second they get regulatory clarity, they're going to be all over it. Is my gut, right? And it'll create opportunities for some companies, and for some, they may find themselves with a lot of competition.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it a great deal. This 18 minutes has passed very fast, and just thank you for being our guest this evening. And we are looking forward to bringing Charles Allen to you live on a Wednesday evening for Q&A, if we can get the schedules to work out. So anyway, Charles, thanks again.
Yep, Chad,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much for having me.
Everybody have a great evening.